In this Midway factoring practice, you are going to follow 3 different steps for each of the problems. First, you're going to factor. I'm going to go through the first 3 methods and then one of these methods down here. Then in the second step, for the first 6, you're going to find the sum of the answers that you got in step 1. For the last 6, you're going to find the difference of the answers that you got in the first step. Then you're going to use that answer in order to decode over here. So let's see how this will work. So each of the slides, you'll see factor each expression and 2 expressions. And then for the first 6, you'll see that number 2 will tell you to find the sum of the expressions. You'll also see a letter up here, which you'll use in order to decode the message once you have the answer. So for the first problem, I'm going to use the distribute method. Remember, in the distribute method, what we do is we break up each one of these terms. So we have x, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in the second polynomial, use 4 as my second term, and again, we're going to put in the second polynomial. So our next step is to go ahead and distribute. So I have x times x, which is equal to x squared, and then I have x times 7, which is equal to 7x. For my second part, I have 4 times x, which is equal to 4x. And then I have 4 times 7, which is equal to 28. The last part I have to do is I have to add these values together because, again, I already broke it up and we're adding in between. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to only have one x squared value. I have my 4x and my 7x, which can add together to give me 11x. And then I just have my 28. For my next one, I'm going to use the FOIL method. So for FOIL, I start with my first. So I have my x times my x to give me x squared. Then I go to my outers. So I have x times 5, which gives me plus 5x. Then I have my inners. So I have 8 times x, which gives me, again, plus 8x. And then lastly, I have my lasts. So I have 8 times 5, which gives me plus 40. Again, I have to combine my like terms. The only like terms that I have here are my x's. So I have x squared plus 13x plus 40. So now that I have the answers to both of my factored expressions, now I'm going to go ahead and move on to step 2, which is to find the sum. So my first polynomial is x squared plus 11x plus 28. Then I'm going to add in my second polynomial. So I have x squared plus 13x plus 40. Now with the parentheses, there's nothing I can do, and I could distribute the positive, but it's not going to change any of the signs inside. So I can go ahead and just erase all of these parentheses and drop them. So my next step is to go ahead and start combining my like terms. So I have x squared and x squared, again, adding them together. So I get 2x squared. Then I have my x terms. So I have 11 plus 13, which gives me a positive 24x. And then finally, I have my constants. So I have 28 plus 40, which gives me a positive 68. So here is my final answer, which I'm going to use by going back to my decoder. And anywhere I see this expression, I'm going to put the letter N. So I see that expression here. I'm going to go ahead and put the letter N. And down here. So I'm going to, again, put the letter N. And now I'm ready to move on to my next term. So for the last 6, you're going to be finding the difference, and it will say that. It'll also change the slide color to blue, just to, again, kind of reinforce that you have changed the problems. You're still going to factor the expression, and you can still use any of the methods in order to factor. So this time I'm going to use the table method, and then I'm going to use one of our property methods over here. So starting out with the table method. Remember, in order to fill my table, I'm going to split up each one of the binomials. So on my top, I'm going to put 2x, and then I'm also going to put a positive 1. across my left side, I'm going to put a 2x and then a -1. Remember, whatever the sign is in front of my constant, we're going to go ahead and we're going to include that in my table. So now I can go ahead and I can find what the commonality is by multiplying them. So I have 2 times 2, which is 4, and then I have x times x, which is x squared. When I come over to this box, I have 1 times 2x, which gives me 2x. When I come down, I have -1 times 2x. So that's going to give me a -2x. And finally, for my constant, I have 1 times -1, which gives me -1. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add up all of the terms together. So I have 4x squared. My 2x plus my -2x, those are going to drop out, so I'm not going to have a term. And lastly, I'm going to have a -1 here. One thing that may have stood out for you to this problem is that this is just the product of a sum and a difference, because it's the same exact terms, my 2x and my 1, my 2x and my 1. The only difference is the sign that I have here. So I have a sum and I have a difference. So I could have used the product of a sum and a difference rule in order to solve for this, where I take my a squared, so I do 2x squared, which gives me 4x squared. And then I subtract out my b squared value. So again, I have 1, and I would square it to give me 1, and then I subtract out my 1. So we're going to go ahead and see this in action with my second problem over here. So again, this is the product of a sum and a difference. So I'm going to take my a value, which is x, and I'm going to square it. And then I'm going to subtract out my b value, which is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I have x squared minus 16. Again, keep in mind, there are 5 different ways that you can go about factoring. Any of the 5 are okay. These last 2, however, they do have to follow the specific pattern in order for you to be able to use them. So my next step is to go ahead and find the difference. So I have my first, and then I have my second. Now here it's a little different because in finding the difference, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to distribute this negative into all of my terms. So this is going to become plus -x squared plus 16. In that, I would rewrite this as 4x squared minus 1, again, plus -x squared plus 16. Now I can go ahead and I can add my like terms. So I have 4x squared minus x squared, which gives me 3x squared. And I have -1 plus 16, which gives me positive 15. My last step is to go ahead and do the decoding. So I'm looking for anywhere where 3x squared plus 15 is, and I'm going to put an s. So I can see my 3x squared plus 15 here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write my s into the decoder. At the very end, you should have a complete message here. So the only other aspect that you want to make sure is that you're following the directions for showing your work. You don't have to show your work for every single slide, but you do need to show your work for a total of 6 slides. 3 where you're finding the sum, and 3 where you're finding the difference. Again, you can use these practice problems as one of your sums and one of your differences. So you would only have to do 2 more where you show me the entire problems from step 1 to step 2. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Enjoy your day.